Good morning and welcome to Coffee and Conversation with James Shappell, Director, DoD Insider Threat Management and Analysis Center, DCSA. Now, please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson Heckenberg.
Good morning and thank you everyone, and thank you Allie, and thank you for everybody who is joining us today for this Tuesday morning coffee and conversation. We are excited to welcome one of our community's top leaders to the discussion. Before we begin though, just a few housekeeping notes. If you have questions, and I know several of you submitted some in advance, but there's the opportunity to do it live today, please submit them to the question box on the right side of your screen. I'll do my best to get to as many as time allows, and feel free to include your name and organization if you choose. We'd also like to welcome members of the press to today's discussion. Please remember this event is on the record, it's being recorded, and we'll have it available for viewing later this week. Finally, a big thank you to our sponsor, Sims, whose logo is behind me, but the sun doesn't want to cooperate, for their support of this program. We could not bring you this level of thought leadership without their support. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. James Shappell, Director of the DoD Insider Threat Management and Analysis Center, also known as the DITMAC. In this role, he serves as the Senior Advisor to the DCSA Director on Insider Threat and oversees all DoD level operations, program management, and business support for DITMAC. Previously, he was the DITMAC Deputy Director and Chief of DITMAC Analysis and Mitigation. And prior to joining DCSA, James served as the Chief of Staff at the National Intelligence Council at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. He also held several positions at the U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command. Please join me in welcoming James Shappell to today's Coffee and Conversation. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Suzanne. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So I have a couple of kickoff questions to set the landscape. We're going to try not to use acronyms today. This is our challenge, okay? I know it's hard. I've already defined what DITMAC is, so I'm allowed to use that acronym. But to start us off, can you give us a brief overview of DITMAC's mission and how it supports both the Department of Defense and the cleared defense industrial base?
Sure. So the history on the DITMAC was created following the tragic events of the Washington Navy Yard shooting back in 2013. There was, along with the start towards continuous vetting, right? So it makes sense that the DITMAC and the continuous vetting mission both reside within DCSA because those were both born out of the same incident. And so the DITMAC provides an enterprise level capability that supports the 45 DoD components. So 45 DoD components, each of them manage their own insider threat programs. There's 43 hubs for those components. Some hubs support multiple components. And so each one of them kind of work through the processes of insider risk, insider threat. If you've seen one component hub, you've seen one, because they're all really super different. So the Defense Commissary Agency, for instance, has a lot of different priorities than the Defense Intelligence Agency. And so part of our job, our role, is to provide enterprise level support. We receive reporting from those components. We have analytic capabilities that can support them. Some of them don't have their own analytic capabilities. Some of them are looking for some advanced analytics. We have a Behavioral Threat Analysis Center, trying not to use the acronyms, but it's going to be hard, a BTAC that has behavioral psychologists, counterintelligence, law enforcement experts, threat assessors, threat managers, cyber experts, and management employee relations, a true multidisciplinary team that looks at those really most challenging problem sets. We conduct PAI reviews for cases that we receive, and we provide that back. We also conduct assessments of DoD insider threat programs. So we've looked at 26 out of the 45 so far, to not just determine if they're meeting the national minimum standards, but whether they're effective. So are you following your policies and procedures? What does that look like? Is it a push? Is it a pull? How do you have automated systems? Things like that. So we get a kind of a bird's eye view of how the department is operating from an insider threat perspective, both at the tactical level and the ability to manage and support cases, and from the strategic perspective and looking at their programs. So from a DoD perspective, that's what we do. We're really starting to work with the industrial security team, Matt Redding's team at DCSA, on how we bring insider threat support to industry as well. And so we've got some insider threat representatives who are out in the field. They've been primarily looking to support DoD components at the local installation level, and we're starting to get them ingrained into how they can help support more on the industry side of things. So DCSA, big DCSA, is obviously the only purpose-built security agency in the federal government. We strive to be the premier provider of integrated security services, and so this is an opportunity for our insider threat capabilities to be permeated within background investigations and industrial security and our counterintelligence special agents partners out there in the field, as well as then receiving that information back into the headquarters to fuse that data and make sure it gets back out there. So DITMAC serves a number of different roles, both internal to DCSA and from the larger DoD perspective. And we're really starting to work hard at how we can get more support out to the local level for the Defense Industrial Base, the National Industrial Security Program. And we've seen that through a lot of training over the last year. Some of our subject matter experts from the Behavioral Threat Analysis Center have been out there, and we're starting to get our insider threat reps a little bit more ingrained in that process as well.
So the insider threat reps that are engaging with industry, and we've got a lot of folks from industry in the webinar today. How many individuals would you say that is now roughly? And then what's the concept for growth there?
Yeah, so right now it's about 25. Okay. And so we're working through the process of what does that look like? Again, the industrial security reps, they're the face of the franchise. They're the ones who are going to be the direct interface with industry. And so how we work by, with, through them to provide support to industry, we're still kind of working through that process. We're looking for an initial operating capability coming up on 1 October. And so we need to define how we step into FOC. And I think it fits, right in with the Secretary of Defense's initiative to rebuild the military, make sure we can get technology delivered in an uncompromised fashion. We need to be looking holistically from an insider threat perspective of what that looks like. So the agency director, Director Cattler, looking at the tea leaves and looking forward, was thinking very strategically when we looked at how we can make sure that we're supporting both at the military installation and in industry. So a small team, working hard, always rowing hard, and still developing holistically what that's going to look like with our partners in industrial security and counterintelligence.
Well, it's very encouraging. So next question related to the threat landscape. What are some of the most significant insider threat trends you're seeing today, and how have they evolved in response to any sort of workforce shifts or return to office mandates? Yeah,
so I think we all need to learn how to work in an office together again, right? So there's a lot of stress, right, with trying to get folks back to the office, trying to make sure that we can interact with each other and really driving the mission forward. And so what we are seeing is that the trends are pretty similar on the numbers relative to like criminal activity, criminal conduct, behavioral conduct, things like that. But the behavioral overall, the reporting is probably going to be a little bit higher, right? So we typically get between 4,500, 5,500 reports. This year, we're probably going to get pretty close to 6,000. And so just a general uptick across the board, but the trends are pretty similar. We know that our adversaries are targeting the recently departed workforce. And so it's really critical that folks maintain their vigilance, understand what elicitation and solicitation look like, and continue to protect the secrets that they've had access to as they move forward with whatever their new roles and responsibilities are. And for the workforce that remains, to maintain that diligence in our execution. Even if the workforce is a little smaller and the work still needs to get done, we need to make sure that we're not putting ourselves where we're rushing and we're accidentally making mistakes that lead to increased risk. So a few things that just as reminders, we're not necessarily seeing huge upticks from a reporting perspective on some of those, but definitely some things that we should be cognizant of and aware of as we move forward.
So even though that is very minimal with the attrition of folks leaving, what is being done in order to continue to educate them on any sort of risk that may exist from outside threats?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Each component, each company, everybody's kind of responsible for making sure that as personnel depart, they sign their non-disclosure agreements. They make sure that they are reminded of their lifetime agreement with the federal government to protect that information, to know their contact information. So if they are solicited, they know how to reach out. And we're trying to make sure that we do our part. We publish a monthly BTAC bulletin, Behavioral Threat Analysis Center bulletin, on the DCSA website. And so we've put one out there on elicitation recently. We just put one out there on embarrassment, right? So if people are embarrassed about different things in the workforce, what that could look like and result in. So we're trying to put our awareness products out there. Ultimately, we're reliant on the local commands, the local leadership to make sure that people are reminded of their responsibilities before they depart, and then they uphold that, right? They're still maintaining that agreement that they signed with the government.
That's helpful, thank you. So I'm going to move on to some technology questions. How is DITMAC leveraging AI-driven risk to detect insider threats early on, and what measures ensure these tools are accurate, fair, and also actionable?
Yeah, it's a great question. As technology evolves, we want to make sure that we are not losing the human in the loop on that. And so the DCSA leadership has really embraced an agile framework and moving forward with agile development of technology and capabilities. They're also working on a capability that will allow us to have the data that DCSA holds placed into a single location and then used by those who have the authorities to use it, which I think is going to be incredibly helpful. Going back to the idea of, and I promise I'll answer the AI question, but I want to kind of set the table for getting there, right? So from an insider threat perspective, if we go back to Dr. Eric Shaw's critical pathway to insider risk, we know that we've got to start with, like, what are the personal predispositions? What do you bring into work every day, right? Like, what are your biases? What are you, somebody who breaks the rules on a regular basis? Is there, mental health concerns? Not that mental health is a disqualifier, but those are history things that we need to take into consideration, right? And then we have what are the stressors that individual is receiving, right? Are there increased timelines on work? Are there things going on at home, marital challenges, good things, right? Like having a new baby, but it's extremely stressful, right? Like those are things that can result in behavior changes, right? And so now we're looking at how are they manifesting. So just going down Shaw's critical path, from our perspective, when we start to talk about how we bring the data together and start thinking about how we can use AI, how do we build in that model that allows us to see what are those personal predispositions? What are the behaviors that are manifesting? And then think about structured professional judgment tools. So think about things like Waiver 21, Workplace Assessment of Violence Risk 21, or TRAP 18, Terrorist Radicalization Assessment Protocol 18, right? So there's a number of structured professional judgment tools in addition to Shaw's critical path that if we start to incorporate them, they're already scientifically researched, and they will help us to say, hey, there's a potential for increased risk based upon these things, right? So there's, like, for TRAP 18, there's 18 different questions that have to be answered. Waiver 21, 21 different questions. So we know that there's different questions that need to be answered. So one of our team members has done the work to map a lot of structured professional judgment tools to the data that DCSA already has available, so we can identify what our data gaps are. And so there's still just a little bit of work that needs to take place to get us to a point where we can start to say, hey, based upon this data, based upon these tools, we're going to have this be triaged in a way that allows a human to get eyes on it sooner. So that's the pathway that we're working towards to try to get there. Those are the scientific methods and models that we want to use to try to help to make sure that we reduce the biases. And then the tools, the AI ML tools, they're only as good as the people who train them. So we've got some really smart folks. We just had some really smart interns who trained me on the AI thing over the summer. They were helping me to understand the different prompts and things like that and how to use them. And so how we get to a point where we're able to incorporate that and actually utilize it is what we're shooting for. And obviously we want that to be something that permeates across the department, right? Not just the DITMAC. And so there's a roadmap for DSATs, the Defense Security Analysis and Threat System. That's going to be the enterprise insider threat capability moving forward. And so we're working through with the program manager from DCSA's Program Executive Office on how that moves forward, along with all of the components to make sure that we're prioritizing all the right things for them as well.
So for anybody who wants to dig in, Shaw's critical path, which you've mentioned several times, something tells me my team is going to be dropping that into the chat for folks to access. So thank you for that reference. So how is DITMAC addressing the rise of deep fakes and synthetic media, particularly the risk of adversaries who are going to impersonate insiders or working to manipulate trust?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? So one, I would advise folks to just be cognizant of what they put out on the web is one. So the more that you put out there, the easier it is to kind of fake you. And so that would be one. But two, then it's back to the professionals, the security, the counterintelligence, the insider threat professionals, to make sure you're doing your due diligence. So when we see something that is out of context, out of behavior, it's a different type of behavior than we would normally see. We need to do our due diligence to make sure, is this the right person? Are we actually seeing all of the right things with this individual? What are the personal predispositions? Going back to Shaw's path, right? Like, how did we get to these behaviors of concern? Right. And do the due diligence, because the adversary is going to do that, right? They're going to find ways. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to sow chaos. They're trying to recruit. They're trying to work to undermine our capabilities in any way possible. The best thing that we can do is, one, not give them the ammunition to do so by posting things out there, and then two, make sure that our professionals are doing their due diligence. Insider threat really shouldn't be a gotcha game. If we're doing our job right, we will be earlier in the process, and then we can get those referrals to counterintelligence and law enforcement when we get further down the process. If we're getting referrals over there, it means we didn't get the information in time to try to get the person off the critical path.
Okay. So I've got lots of questions rolling in here, and just a reminder to our attendees, question box is on the right side of your screen. Here's a question from Kathy Coviello at Army Material Command. Kathy wants to know what data protection strategies can be implemented to guard against threats from AI.
Kathy, I love you. That's a tough question, and it is probably beyond my capacity, right? When we talk about data protections, I would look over to our program executive office. I'd look to our AI team, and I would say, hey guys, are we doing all of the right things? One of the great things about my role, and I think a lot of our mission leads, is we get to focus a lot on the actual mission. And DCSA has got a great team in the program executive office and the chief information office. And those folks are amazing professionals, and they know exactly what to do. So we tell them this is what we need to do, and they help us to get there. So I hate to punt on that one, but I'm going to punt on that one.
No, James, that's a great lead-in for us to soon feature someone from the program executive office on a coffee and conversation. So I love the continuity here. Yeah. So how is DITMAC partnering with industry? And we talked a little bit in the green room about academia to develop any sort of scalable mission-driven insider risk solutions.
Yeah, so I mentioned the DSATs, the Defense Security Analysis and Threat System. It gets a little tough because the mandate for industry is a little bit different on the insider threat side. It's not as prescriptive, right, as perhaps the personnel security or the counterintelligence pieces. And so I think that they've tried to incorporate that into the 32 CFR and the NISPOM and make some initial minimum standards. But the government doesn't have a whole lot of latitude. It's like, do you have somebody assigned? Do you have a plan, right? There's not a lot of meat to that. As far as the technical capabilities, we have talked about the potential for DSATs to scale. But we're still trying to make sure that we can work through the DoD delivery and make sure that that's done as well. So there's still a long way to go. There's a couple other things that we're kind of waiting on too, right? One is, the final disposition of how do we share more insider threat related information with industry. So we need a national level policy to help us get there on that, which will help with the potential systems-based conversation. And how do we continue to mature those insider threat reps in the field that I talked about? Because we know that they can potentially help. They can help the IPSO consider the different challenges and insider threat programs security office they can help them to kind of phrase the question, talk about how they bring folks to the table, look at the risk and things like that. But ultimately, it's based upon information that industry already has. So we're somewhat still limited. But I think once we get national level policy, the system develops a little bit further. That'll be an area that we could probably see additional growth and support to the industry side.
So while we're talking about industry, Vivian LaSalle has a question, and she asks, are there current or future opportunities for collaboration with commercial partners to detect AI-generated content used for social engineering or reputational harm?
I'm sure there are. Again, I think some of that is who are the foreign actors doing this? So it goes into a level of counterintelligence, probably beyond the scope of what I would be the expert at. Those are things that I would hope that the FBI would be looking more into and really leading the charge on some of that. A lot of ours goes back to, again, what are we seeing as far as behaviors of concern for individuals? So again, not trying to punt, more of a counterintelligence focus. And again, I think that while counterintelligence is an amazing partner and they will help us to understand the threats that are taking place, and they will take it and run with it when we get too far down the path for certain insiders, there is a slight distinction that I know that a lot of CI professionals historically don't necessarily want to acknowledge, but there is a slight distinction between, personnel security as a mission and insider threat as a mission and counterintelligence as a mission. So there's a continuity between those, and there's a lot of information that we use that is worked together, but there's a bit of a gap on that. So when we talk about holistic insider threats, I would say that's more of probably a counterintelligence law enforcement type of activity.
Okay. As I mentioned, we've got quite a few folks from industry in today's Coffee and Conversation. I think we had close to 500 registrants. How do companies more effectively engage with DITMAC to strengthen their insider threat detection and response capabilities?
Yeah, so I would say that the industrial security reps are the place to start, right? They are the face of, like I said, the face of the franchise. The ISRs out there, and the CISAs, the counterintelligence special agents that DCSA puts out there. Again, DCSA driving to be that premier provider of integrated security services. So if you reach out to your ISR or your CISA, there are insider threat reps that are within each of the regions of DCSA. And so there's an opportunity to bring them in to be able to coordinate and have discussions. One of the things that we just want to make sure that we're very cognizant of is when we come in and we start talking about, here are the things that we may have seen, or here are some of the best practices. We aren't directing you to go beyond what the NISPOM states that you should do. So we can tell you, here are the best practices, here are some things to consider, but ultimately the risk appetite is up to you and your company, and the standards are the standards. And so we're working with our industrial security team at DCSA. We're looking at opportunities that they're not fully baked yet, so I don't want to put everything out there, but I think that there's a greater chance, a greater opportunity. We have used our Behavioral Threat Analysis Center on a few coordinated consults with companies. They're usually when somebody's pretty far down the path and they're trying to figure out the right next step. So we have to work through our OGC on that to make sure, again, we're not stepping beyond the lines. But it has happened. We want to provide the right level of support, and from my perspective, it's just making sure that we are protecting individuals' privacy from a Privacy Act perspective. We're not sharing things that we're not authorized to share, and we're also obviously giving deference to those industrial security reps, those counterintelligence special agents who have built those relationships and those reporting protocols over years and years of practice. So there's an opportunity. Talk to your CISA, talk to your ISR, and ask for some support from your insider threat reps. We're continuing to kind of build that bridge.
So, along the vein of your counsel for some best practices for industry, this is, I think, particularly relevant to small businesses, but also to some of the larger ones as well. What resources, training, guidance does DITMAC recommend for organizations looking to launch their own insider threat programs?
Yeah, I mean, the first place is almost always CDSE, right? The Center for the Development of Security Excellence. It's under the DCSA Security Training Directorate. So, again, DCSA is just, it's a really, they knew what they were doing when they built the agency. And so that would be probably the first step. Go take some training from CDSE. two, if you're trying to kind of take it to the next step, within CDSE, you'll find webinars, and we do a monthly webinar with CDSE. So the DITMAC brings the training personnel, they bring in subject matter experts in a number of different areas, and CDSE provides the platform and the outreach. So I would start there with CDSE. We also just published on the DCSA website some NITAM notes, some little plug here, which talks about how to build some partnerships with different elements. So this year's National Insider Threat, acronyms, sorry. National Insider Threat Awareness Month.
I'm not grading you today, don't worry.
Yeah, I failed miserably on the acronym. So September is National Insider Threat Awareness Month, a great opportunity to promote that out. And this year's theme is partnering for progress. And so what we tried to do is we tried to go back and look at who are the partners for insider threat. We know cybersecurity, we know security generally, so traditional security, physical personnel, information security, counterintelligence, and law enforcement. So we've got 10 of these NITAM notes sitting out there, OGC, and they basically say, hey, this is how you can partner together. Here's what some of the traditional challenges are with partnering with these different elements and organizations within a company, within the Department of Defense. And here's what the value is. Here's what the value proposition is for both sides, because it is a give and a take. And so if one side's not seeing the value or doesn't understand the value, they're probably not going to give, which makes it really hard for the other element to do what they need to do. So I would say that's on the DITMAC page under the DCSA website. I think they'll probably drop that one in there. And on that same page are a number of BTAC bulletins. We publish those monthly. So each month we're working with CDSE to get a webinar out there. We're working to get a BTAC bulletin out there. For National Insider Threat Awareness Month, we've got these, I think there's 10 NITAM notes on how you work with different partners. One of them's for commanders out there. So that kind of transcends leaders, right? Because I really think that they're the tip of the spear. Leaders are the tip of the spear. You see your people on a daily basis. You kind of understand how they interact on a daily basis. You're the ones who are going to see the behavior change first. And so those are opportunities to kind of look at how do I get buy-in? How do I bring the right people together? Who are the right people to bring together? And so those would be some areas that I'd recommend people consider.
Great, and thank you, Team INSA. If folks check out the chat, there's some links to some of the content that James is referencing. So here's a question, and I have a couple of workforce-related questions, folks that are currently maybe in government or in the private sector that I'm trying to get to. What are some of the required trainings an industry person must meet to be a professional in this field? If there is no required training, what are some training an industry person can attend, or any recommended certifications that are available for folks in industry?
Yeah, so there's I think there's 3 classes that you have to take to be like considered an insider threat program person from CDSE. And if you send us a note or send something to your ISR, your industrial security rep, we'll make sure you get what those courses are. I don't know them off the top of my head. I know that there was some recent changes, and one of the things that we're looking at is how do we provide something that's a all-in-one type of basket. So we're working with industrial security to see how that might work in the future. So that's like the minimum. But again, the standards from the 32 CFR from the NISPOM are very minimal. And so if you're trying to take it to the next step, so the University of Maryland offers graduate level courses. So there's a graduate certificate. You can take 4 classes. So that's a potential option. They also offer the global counter insider threat certification. So not to promote that you have to go to the University of Maryland, they're just the ones who offer it.
That's a great resource folks should be aware of.
And then Carnegie Mellon also offers the Insider Threat Program certificate, right? So it's a certificate program. So there are a couple of different ones that are extremely helpful. Carnegie Mellon has their publication that comes out every 7 years. It's like they're on their 7th edition, the certs. I can't read that far. It's on my bookshelf. But Carnegie Mellon puts out a publication. They're on their 7th edition. It's a pretty exhaustive list of how to approach insider threat as well. So Carnegie Mellon, University of Maryland, those are available to industry. And then again, anything on the CDSE website's open. And so that's another avenue that you can pursue. So, and then I guess I would also say that as we get into National Insider Threat Awareness Month, there's always a ton of like conferences or seminars or things like that. And if you're looking for something specific to like your facility or your company, and you want like an insider threat rep or somebody from the Behavioral Threat Analysis Center or something to come out and provide some type of training, that can be requested as well through the same process. And we'll probably say, hey, you got more than like 5 people, right? Just because it's a lot of time to try to make sure that we've got the right folks there. But if we can get it like an NCMS chapter or something like that, and they're going to have some kind of a meeting and they want some kind of training, we're usually pretty good at trying to meet those requests as well.
Really helpful information, particularly as we lead into September and Insider Threat Awareness Month. So good resources to check out. We've dropped some information into the chat about it. So here's a question from one of your colleagues at DCSA related to education and training. Edwin Kabeski wants to know, what training and informational resources do you recommend for program management? Is there anything on the horizon from DSA along that vein?
Yeah, so program management gets a little bit different, right? Because now you're just trying to make sure that you've got all of the right things in place, you're setting the policies, and you've got the right resources. So it's a little bit harder from an insider threat perspective. I think a good program manager can learn pretty quickly about the different aspects. There's nothing specific to that. A lot of that I'm aware of. There may be on the CDSE website. Again, they've got just an amazing amount of content there. So one of the things that we are looking at, we've got the BTAC bulletins, we've got the NITAM notes. We're looking at something like that we're going to try to start publishing on a quarterly basis for the program managers, things for consideration, but we're not there yet. So look for it in the first quarter of FY25 as we continue to look at how we can develop some of those notes that will help. But I'm not completely familiar, because a lot of our effort, so like the Insider Threat Detection Analysis course offered by CDSE is about detection analysis. So there's not a lot from a program management perspective to be super helpful. It's a lot of on-the-job training and learning.
Which is very powerful. So here's a question from Artie Smith, one of our attendees. Artie wants to know, how does DoD plan to collaborate on insider threat with civilian agency-focused insider threat programs?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially as we see like obviously the tech developing really quickly. So it becomes a little bit more difficult. It's a good question. I'm trying to pull from my memory banks, like what we've done in the past, because we've had people who are like reservists who work at like Walmart, and we get some kind of an indicator from a reserve perspective, and it's like, how do we, from a Privacy Act perspective, share that information? Even thinking about our counterintelligence special agents, how would they share potential threat information with a company that doesn't have a clearance? So there's definitely some challenges there from an authority's perspective on what we can and can't share. Obviously, duty to warn would come in certain circumstances, but it's a good question, especially as we look at the artificial intelligence kind of technology jump that we're seeing, and how do we protect that information that maybe is not DoD information yet, but it's being developed in the private sector, and it's going to have a national security piece to it. So it's a good question. I think it's a paper that INSA just actually published and explored about research in particular and technology and how that's being protected when it's got dual use. And so I don't think we've got the full answer yet. There's a lot of different elements at play on that one.
Well, thanks for the INSA plug. Folks can go to our website and pull that down under publications. So we did not plan that. So here's a question from Crystal Baker, and she wants to know, and this is a crystal ball question, so very appropriate that Crystal asked this question. Does the DITMAC look at organizational antecedents that could contribute to a person being on the critical path or maybe exacerbate behaviors of concern?
Really, really good question. So that would be one of the things that I think our partners at OSD PNR would look like, Personnel and Readiness, Office of Secretary of Defense Personnel Readiness. When they talk about, so they are doing a lot of work looking at things like command climate surveys and the use of different programs like employee assistance programs and things like that on military installations, trying to identify where there may be increased risk. And is it because of a command related issue, or is it because they're just in a really not so great duty assignment? Or, what does that look like? And so trying to look at data and big data and trends, that's what they're trying to look at. So we're trying to look specifically at individuals with behaviors of concern, and they're looking at big data, trying to identify where some of those things are. That being said, as we develop the technology and the capabilities a little bit further, we'll be able to identify, oh, we've got this unit down at, pick your fort, I'm an Army guy, Fort Hood, Fort Bragg, whatever. Why are we seeing an increased number of reports or challenges at Fort Bliss, right? So we're not completely there yet, but, and again, we're focused on the individual behaviors of concern, so individual personnel. But we know that OSD Personnel Readiness is looking at that from a big data perspective. And I think that that's an opportunity for us to continue to partner with them and try to identify, do we need to go down and provide additional training for the behaviors of concern that we might see for individuals in those installations that they're identifying might have a greater risk. So there's still a lot of work to do. Insider threat as a discipline is about 13 years old. So 2012 was 2011 was the executive order, 2012 national minimum standards. So so we're still kind of trying to get to that next step as well. But a great question, because we know that the organizational response, if you get a maladaptive organizational response, that the individual is likely to continue further down the critical path instead of being able to pull them off and put your arm around them and take care of them. Again, it goes back to SecDef priorities, restore the warrior ethos. Part of that is non-commissioned officers taking care of soldiers, right? Making sure that they are getting what they need, and that they are, if they need some discipline and reinstilled in them, that they're doing that, but they're doing that in a manner that's constructive and able to get them to the next level. So I think it fits right into with the SecDef priorities to make sure we're taking those next steps to enable our warfighters to make sure that they're able to do the things that we need them to do and really drive forward with the mission that we need them to do to protect our national security.
So I'm going to weave back to AI. Here's a question from Roman Willis, Virginia Tech Hokie. How is AI-driven risk scoring being balanced with concerns about privacy bias and false positive in insider threat programs?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it earlier. We're still kind of working towards the end goal here. I know that there are some programs within the department that they use de-identified data. And so when that gets put into the system, it's really just based upon the personal predispositions, the behaviors of concerns that are being identified and things like that. So it helps to reduce some of the potential bias that you could be seeing there. I also think when we get to the point where we're able to incorporate some of these structured professional judgment tools, once again, you're going back to really having a structured way to look at the data and being able to identify people who might be at an increased risk, which just helps us to kind of move forward. I think the other big misconception is that, like, as soon as somebody's got, they've been reported to insider threat, they're just going to scoop them up, put the bag over their head, you put the zip ties on. No. If we can get to people early enough, if we can identify the risk early enough, we want to get them help, right? Service members, we spend a lot of time trying to get them trained. They've got special expertise. People who are working out in the National Industrial Security Program, again, they bring special expertise. The department could not do this without the Defense Industrial Base. So we need to have those critical players who are out there. So the earlier we can identify the risk, If we can get them help through management employee relations, through other programs, the better. And then maybe we don't have to worry about counterintelligence showing up or law enforcement. So yeah, I think it's important that, yes, we have to balance the bias perspective. We want to protect the data and the privacy. We've got great partners at DCSA that are helping us to make sure we do that. But also, you're not bagging and stuffing anybody. That's not our role.
I think our attendees are encouraged to learn that from you. So now here's a question. Jim Onesco at LexisNexis Services, and I'm glad he's asking this related to social media. But does DCSA plan to implement a program to address Seed 5, publicly available social media information in the future?
Yeah. So.
First of all,
yeah, so some of that's, I think when you start talking about the seeds, I'm going to punt to personnel vetting. Mark Sherwin is our assistant director for personnel vetting. And so I think there's a lot of other conversations there about how we're going to get there. And so not necessarily my area of expertise in that particular zone, but what I would say is that from an insider threat perspective, our look at things like publicly available information are based upon known behaviors of concern that we're seeing. So we don't do anything until we hear that there's behaviors of concern for an individual, and then we're just trying to contextualize. Is there something out there that's going to help us to see? Is there other behaviors of concern? What are we actually understanding? And so just trying to get a view of what might be going on with the individual and trying to get to a better place so we can help with an assessment of risk.
So we've got time for maybe one more question. Here is a question from Brian Liu. Have there been any key findings or lessons learned that resulted from the implementation of continuous vetting for personnel and on the industrial security side? How is the DITMAC integrated into the development of the continuous vetting for facilities capabilities as well? So, continuous vetting related to individuals as well as facilities.
Well, so neither one is directly my mission. So I don't want to overstep into, again, Mark Sherwin on the personnel vetting side or Matt Redding on the industrial security side. What I'll say though is that we've got really great partnerships. We've got some insider threat analysts embedded with personnel vetting. So when we see incident reports that come in, depending on the severity and how they're triaged, we're looking at it from an insider risk perspective too, and how we can potentially provide some value and coordinate with the components. And so from a DCSA perspective, again, that's what we do. We are integrated in the way that we look at security holistically. And so, like I mentioned, we're starting to look a little bit closer at how we do that with industrial security. So great partners over there, and looking at how we can provide the insider threat mission more benefit within the industrial security mission. So when you talk about, like, our mission really cross-cuts across everything else that DCSA does. We've got amazing partners within the program executive office, helping to build the tools and the capabilities across industrial security and personnel vetting, and trying to really grow that capability and security training. And within counterintelligence as well. We've just got a really good team, and we've had really good leadership over the last few years where they've embraced the idea of insider threat being a part of that cross-cutting mission with counterintelligence. And so it's not a perfect answer on what have we seen. We see things that are reported only to security, personnel security, or only to insider threat. And so we're cross-leveling that. And we see things that are reported to personnel security that might have an increased risk on the risk side. So we're working through that. We're seeing results, they're positive. But we're still kind of maturing that. And I think with next level technologies and capabilities, we'll really be able to take the next step.
Well, thank you for that. And James, it's very encouraging to know that you are in the role you are in, and we appreciate your sharing your Tuesday morning with us. We're kind of out of time here, but I wanted to thank all of our attendees for joining us as well. A truly valuable conversation that will be available online again on our website later this week. And also just a very special thank you once more to INSA member SIMS for sponsoring today's program. And to everyone tuning in online, we really do appreciate your time, your your engagement with the organization. In a moment, a brief survey will pop up. If you would just take about 2 minutes to fill us out, let us know how we did today, as well as who you want to hear from for future morning coffee and conversations. And looking ahead, we hope many of you will be able to join us for our 2025 Intelligence and National Security Summit on September 18th and 19th at National Harbor that we partner with FCA on. Please check out INSA's website for more information and how to register. And thank you again, James, for joining us today. Everyone have a wonderful Tuesday.